Hello everyone, I recently made a custom Super Mario Bros. Wonder level called Snowcapped Stampede. The idea for this level came from a YouTube comment I got, which suggested I combine bull rushes and snow blocks. At one point I also planned on including kabooms, these fireworks guys, in the level, since they could also destroy snow blocks, but as you'll see during the upcoming time-lapse, very early on in the level creation process I decided to swap them out for sleeping Goombas, since I felt like kabooms just didn't really fit what I'd planned for the level. It still ended up including some fireworks stuff though, which is also why I decided that the level should be set at night. So I messed with the snowy sky background and lighting in a similar way to how I did for my very first custom level. I decided to include fire piranha plants since their fireballs can melt snow blocks. And I also thought it would make sense for the level to use POW blocks and munches because of the way those could interact with bull rushes and snow blocks. So with all the mechanics decided upon, it was time to start working on the level. The way I felt about this level's overall quality changed quite drastically during the creation process. When I started, it felt like I'd sort of rushed into things, which is why you'll see me reworking the same few sections over and over again. I hadn't really thought through things as much as I usually do. But I think around the time I decided to remove the kabooms from the level and put more focus on the bull rushes and fire piranha plants, I suddenly hit my stride. The original game doesn't really use bull rushes for many different interesting setups, so it was really fun coming up with all sorts of unique contraptions for them to interact with in this level. Combining them with munchers also proved to be a great decision, since obviously munchers damage the player but not bull rushes, so this was a nice way of forcing the player to rely on the bull rushes. On the other hand, finding interesting ways of using fire piranha plants was quite difficult, because although their fireballs can melt snow blocks, this happens pretty slowly. I ended up taking advantage of this slowness for some secrets later on in the level, where piranha plants slowly melt snow blocks that the player can stand on to obtain collectibles. And either way, I was never planning on making fire piranha plants a major focus of the level, so regardless, I'm happy with the extent to which I managed to include them. As for the sleeping Goombas, I'm honestly amazed with how many different setups I managed to come up with for them. If they're placed on a snow block that gets destroyed, they wake up. So throughout this level, I found all sorts of ways of having both bull rushes and fire piranha plants drop Goombas from the sky by melting the snow blocks they were sleeping on. The level's theming is a bit more unique than you may have realized, by the way. Due to the way I wanted to design the level's wonder effect, it sort of had to be a sky level, but the original game's sky levels in Fluff Puff Peaks aren't really snow themed. The terrain in those levels doesn't produce snow particles, and it isn't actually snowing in any of those levels either. Since this level uses snow blocks as one of its central mechanics, I decided to add falling snowflake particles to the level, and I also used these purple ground terrain tiles that are used for the original game's snow levels. So this level's theme is basically a mix between the two themes that originally appeared in Fluff Puff Peaks. The way that POW blocks work in Super Mario Bros. Wonder makes them a bit difficult to work with. As opposed to how they worked in New Super Mario Bros. 2 and Super Mario 3D World, in Wonder, red POW blocks can be picked up by the player. This means that if I were to design a section where the player has to destroy a wall using a POW block to progress, the player could just pick up the POW block, then destroy it somewhere else, and then they'd be stuck. So for most of my uses of POW blocks in this level, I either made using the POW block optional, or I encased the POW block in other blocks so the player couldn't easily pick it up. Another strange thing about POW blocks that I discovered whilst working on this level is how they only interact with one type of munches. Wonder has these muncher group objects that allow you to place 2, 4, or even 8 munches as one big object, which saves on processing power, I guess, but these muncher group objects can't be destroyed by POW blocks. So for the few sections in this level where I relied on a POW block destroying munches, I had to make sure to place individual muncher objects. A player could technically grab a POW block from somewhere in the level and then throw it at a group of munchers in another part of the level, and then that wouldn't destroy those munches, but I don't think that's a big deal, honestly. For the level's first bonus room, I decided to make a pretty obvious setup where the player has to ride a bull rush across a large field of munches. I was originally planning on placing multiple bull rushes in a row for this section, which would make it a bit more manageable for a group of players to play through the bonus room, but lining up multiple bull rushes in a way to where they didn't crash into each other proved to be impossible without leaving large gaps. So the section ended up only including a single bull rush, which is still fine since Nintendo did something very similar similar in the original game with only a single bull rush as well. Structurally, this level is pretty strange as far as its verticality goes. There's 2 small vertical sections around the midway, but the majority of the level is completely horizontal. However, as you'll see later on, I went completely crazy with vertical and diagonal sections in the final third of the level, especially during the Wonder effect, which I think really helped to make that section feel special. Something that was kind of unavoidable in terms of design for this level was having the player occasionally wait for certain things to happen. Bull rushes take a second or two before they charge, and they take even longer to reverse directions after they've hit a wall. And I've already talked about how slow fire piranha plants are, so yeah, there isn't really much I could do about that, though I made sure to make most of these kinds of sections skippable for the sake of speedrunning or people who are impatient, I guess. The one way to make fire piranha plants a more drastic influence on the level is to make them spit multiple fireballs in an arc, which is a cool feature that Super Mario Bros. Wonder introduced. But of course, this is also relatively difficult for the player to deal with and avoid, so I only started relying on these types of piranha plants in the second half of the level. There's only really one interaction between fire piranha plants and bull rushes that I could think of, which is having a bull rush mow down a fire piranha plant. You might think that it should be possible for the fireballs of a piranha plant to defeat a bull rush as well, and when this happens it does look like the bull rush takes damage, but this doesn't actually seem to be able to kill the enemy. Still, considering both of the enemy types interact very well with all of the level's other mechanics, I think it's fine. I used one of those bubbles that the player has to hit 3 times before it gives them a power-up in the second half of the level, because I like the idea of the player having to deal with that whilst avoiding a bull rush. I suppose if you're watching this, you might be interested in how I record these time lapses in the first place. In real time, this timelapse is roughly 10 hours of footage. For most of my videos, I show that recording at 60 times the original speed. So every second you're seeing here was actually a minute of work. But even then, I didn't work on this level for only 10 hours, because of the time I spent working on a level, I think I only record about half the time. The rest of the time is spent not only playtesting everything I've made, but also just staring at the screen, waiting for inspiration to hit me, trying to come up with the next section. I used to actually show some real playtesting on screen in these time lapses, but as my levels have gotten more complicated, I do more and more playtesting, so that would just be distracting. So now I record those small gameplay snippets after I've already playtested what I've made. I usually do those gameplay recordings once I'm at the end of a recording session, so every time you see gameplay pop up in these time lapses, that marks the end of a recording. There is some work on the level itself that I do off camera, the more trial and error heavy stuff, like adjusting coin placements or timing related things. Not to mention everything that involves working outside of Fushigi. So that's how I usually end up working on one of these custom Wonder levels for roughly a week, and then it takes another day or two to edit these time-lapse videos. The level's second bonus room is one of those things where the coolness of an idea outweighs the fact that the idea doesn't really work perfectly. In this section, the player can use a pulley to rotate a fire piranha plant, allowing them to aim at a group of Goombas that are sleeping on snow blocks that have to be destroyed to get the purple 10 coin. The problem with this setup is that the pulley only moves the pipe in one direction, so if you want the piranha plant to rotate back in the other direction, you have to let go of the pulley. Still, I thought this was such a unique application of the level's more obscure mechanics that it was worth the slight jankiness. It was around this point in the timelapse that I accidentally didn't record a few minutes of work, which is why the beginning of this vertical section has suddenly appeared out of nowhere. I did run into one funny problem when designing that bonus room, which is that the game doesn't actually count enemies that fall into a pit as being defeated. Think about it, if you encounter a Goomba in a level and then it walks into a pit, of course when you reload that section, the Goomba will have respawned. That's just how Mario games work. But since the bonus room works by keeping track of the Goombas getting defeated, and falling into pits doesn't defeat the Goombas, this means the whole bonus room didn't work. Lucky for me, I think Nintendo's designers encountered this same problem during development, which is why there's a special death pit object that actually destroys any object that comes into contact with it. So placing that below the screen in the bonus room made it to where the Goombas were defeated when they fell down, which fixed the setup. Something I kind of struggled with in later sections of this level was keeping munches a somewhat relevant level mechanic. It would be weird if they just disappeared from the level altogether after they were so prevalent in the first half of the level, so this is why I ended up placing them on the walls in the level's vertical section. There's a section just after the midway where 2 bull rushes defeat themselves by hitting a POW block, so I included something similar in a later section of the level, but there the player has to hit the POW block themselves. This level has another one of those course clear question mark exits, just like one of my other recent levels, because I didn't want players who got the wonder effect to be forced to replay the level just for a third wonder seed. Something I tried to put a lot of effort into for this level was reusing one of the original game's wonder effects whilst making it feel unique. So obviously I was going to use the Bull Rush Stampede wonder effect, even if I knew ahead of time that working with this thing would be quite painful. The first way I made the section distinct was by starting the Stampede off moving to the left, meaning it takes the player back through the section they just played through. Sadly, there's an unavoidable bug that I encountered because of this, which is that for some reason the Stampede Bull Rushes don't trigger a jumping animation when jumping to the left. I only realized that this was the case after working on the section for quite some time, so I decided to just roll with it. I don't think it looks that bad, honestly. Another problem I encountered was that I couldn't use the short cutscene animation that normally triggers before a Bull Rush Stampede in the original game. That thing where the ground shakes and the player looks off to the left, yeah, that wouldn't really make sense if the Stampede was approaching from the right, would it? I couldn't find an animation like that where the player looked right instead, so my wonder effect doesn't feature any special animation at all, which once again I don't think is a deal breaker. Still, the truly unique part of this section wasn't even that it started off progressing to the left, but that it also went upwards. I don't really know what made me think of this, but I decided it would be cool to include a vertical rising poison water section in the level where multiple Bull Rush Stampedes would crash through the walls and help the player progress. The rising poison water was mostly there to give a reason why this section would be an autoscroller, and I don't think it's that out of place, since the original game also uses rising poison water in the sky theme in the timing block wonder effect. One of the more complicated things to set up for this area was how the level automatically disables the wonder effect if you don't ride the Bull Rush Stampede. In the original Bull Rush level, the wonder effect gets automatically disabled if you're a certain amount of blocks away from the Stampede, but I needed something a bit different due to the rising poison water. I ended up making it to where just before triggering the rising poison water, the level places a big trigger area where the player would be if they didn't ride the Bull Rush Stampede, and if they're in that area, the wonder effect gets disabled. I actually only realized that there's an object that can disable the wonder effect whilst working on my previous custom level, so it's a nice coincidence that I was able to find a use for it so quickly. For the timing of the Bull Rushes appearing during the vertical section, I used an object that would send out a signal the moment it was on screen, since this would mean that signal would be sent out at a consistent time due to the auto-scrolling. I also made this one section where Bull Rushes would jump over the player and clear out some stone blocks, and I actually made it to where the auto-scrolling and the rising liquid stops for a few seconds to allow this to happen. That setup, and this wonder effect as a whole, feels like one of the most wonder-like sections I've designed in any of my levels so far, just because of how goofy and crazy the whole thing is. In fact, the craziest was yet to come, since I also made a section where multiple stampedes were stacked on top of each other, and the player has to basically climb a staircase of Bull Rushes. After all that stuff, I hadn't really come up with a unique way of finishing the whole section ahead of time, so I ended up making a relatively simple final setup where a stampede does a few big jumps with some enemies and fireworks and stuff. A few time lapses ago, I talked about how Super Mario Bros. Wonder has a limit on the amount of links a level can use, but for this level I encountered an even more infuriating limit on the amount of objects that a Wonder level can use. Yeah, so as it turns out, this level ended up having more individual objects than the game could handle. So by the time I was done working on this Wonder effect, some of the objects in earlier parts of the level were starting to disappear. This mostly came down to the fact that this level uses snow blocks, which are each an individual actor. So as I was finishing up this level, I was also periodically forced to go through earlier sections to remove a bunch of objects to stay below the limit. Mostly snow blocks that didn't serve a purpose, or decorative elements, or coins, or whatever. I knew about this limit ahead of time, but I never imagined I would hit it so easily, so once again this has kind of ruined some of my crazier ideas I've come up with for potential future custom levels. At one point I planned on putting the level's true goal pole in a separate area, but I decided it would be cooler if it was placed right after the Wonder Effect area, since that way the whole level was one giant continuous section basically. As for the level's decorations, the original game's snow theme has surprisingly few types of decorations. Most level themes have these longer terrain edge pieces that break up the ground pattern, but for some reason the snow theme doesn't have these. I considered putting some big clouds floating in the foreground of some sections, like I did for my candy level, but I decided that would look a bit weird with them going in front of the poison water during the wonder effect. So in the end, the level didn't really feature that many decorative elements, which I suppose helped me stay below that object limit I talked about. I did one more off-camera thing, which was adding in the talking flowers, and then the level was done, so let's go have a look at it in-game. Okay, and here we are. So, of course, I introduced the bull rush right at the start here, and I guess we also have munches, and I quite like this setup here where you can jump on the bull rush after it's hit a wall, and then you can get these mini wonder buds, and that leads to this firework here. And it is funny how the level still has fireworks in it, even though, of course, I removed the kabooms after I was originally planning on including those. But I still think that works because like the level is sort of set at night because you can see the moon there, and also like there's fireworks during the wonder effect and stuff. So I think it's fine for it to still have some fireworks stuff. I suppose you could even say the the piranha plant fireballs are sort of like fireworks, maybe. I don't know. It's sort of unintentional here how this bull rush went all the way over here, but I guess I sort of accounted for that by including some coins there that the bull rush would reveal by removing those snow blocks. And here the bull rush gets defeated by the power block like that, which is pretty funny. And that is one of the power blocks where like you could technically like fire into that wall there and then grab the power block, throw it somewhere else, and then you could sort of like if you then take damage and lose your firepower up, I guess you would be stuck. But like at that point, like you've done that to yourself. Like that was fully intentional, and also like Wonder already has some like semi-soft locks in the actual game, and you can exit the level at any point. So I don't really think that's a big deal. I think Nintendo would have also had that. But for example, here this for that big piranha plant that you could defeat with the power block there, you can just jump over that guy in case you decide to like grab the power block or whatever. So in some cases, I did make sure that the power block stuff was optional. Therefore. Here we can ride this bull rush and jump up here, which the talking flower comments on. Funnily enough here, like, the idea originally was that you were also going to exit out of this pipe, which is why I included this this little, like, pass-through section up here, so you could continue over to the right. But in the end, I decided to make that bonus room just, like, drop the player off from the sky, basically. And so, therefore, that whole secret there is sort of pointless and slightly random, but whatever. It's fine to keep secrets like that in a level because, you know, just random secrets are fun. It took a while to get those coins there to line up with the bull rush's jump arc, but it actually lines up pretty consistently now, so that's nice. Here we have a bit of verticality. I really wanted to like do some more interesting stuff with the power blocks, so for example that's why we have this here, even though like mechanically the player just has to wait for a second and there's nothing that interesting that happens. It's kind of fun, and also the way it interacts with the munches. Like I talked about during the time lapse, you can also like there's just some weird stuff with how munches interact with power blocks because of the different muncher objects. But I think for the most part that stuff is fine. There is a lot of just like slightly janky stuff in this level that you can technically sort of break if you know what to look for, and like I just don't really care because I think the level turned out very good. So I think all that jankiness is worth it. I quite like this section here where you can hit the bubble and you can get a power-up from that. It's a nice like alternative to just giving the player another power-up with a question mark block, and also I just failed at getting that, so I guess that demonstrates that it's an effective section because I didn't even like manage to complete the challenge. So over here I really like this talking flower with the piranha plant. He'll also react to if I actually I guess I can just do this right now. If I kill the fire piranha plant, then yeah, the piranha plant, or not the piranha plant, the talking flower reacts to that, so that's nice. And we can go into this bonus room here really quickly before the snow blocks all get melted. And yeah, this bonus room is another one of those things, like I talked about, where like it can be a bit janky, because if I move to the right here, you can see that the piranha plant doesn't move back. So I actually have to let go of the thing and sort of reset it, and then like pull on the pulley again. And oh, I missed. Oh wait, it's gonna walk off the edge. Okay, I see. I forgot that that's also, instead of having to melt the snow blocks, you can also do that, and that also works, which is really funny. There we go. That should hit. Yeah, so that section is a bit janky and a bit, I can imagine it might be a bit frustrating for some players, but I think it's also really cool. Speaking of janky, the way those Goombas respawn there, yeah, that's a bit strange, and I don't think there's much I can do about that. So you just have some Goombas waking up mid-air. Oh well. This vertical part here is kind of fun, I guess. It's not that interesting. It's definitely sort of maybe a bit of a filler section because I wanted the level to progress vertically a little bit to sort of foreshadow what's going to happen in the Wonder Effects section. But I suppose it works. So yeah, here we go. I really like that power block setup there as well, where if you're not fast enough, the bull rushes will just hit you, but you can hit the power block like that. Here you can do this section quite easily without using the bull rush. You can just run across. But of course the idea is that you do this, and then the bull rush kills the piranha plant, and you're also rewarded with some coins. So there we go. I could ride this bull rush and well, if I actually jumped on the bull rush, I could have ridden him and got on the top of the flagpole. But you can also use this bull rush to get the Wonder Flower, which we're gonna do right now. So here we go. I also like how that kills that sleeping Goomba there. And yeah, as you can see, there's no cutscene here. I'm just free to move around, which isn't usually how the Bull Rush Stampede Wonder Effect triggers, but whatever. And I guess I might as well immediately showcase what happens if I jump off the Stampede. You can see that the Wonder Effect actually automatically disables itself, which is really cool, I think, and I'm very happy with how I managed to implement that. And I suppose there really isn't much for me to do except get this fake gold ball here. But of course I still want to show off what the Wonder Effect normally looks like, so let's go back there. Okay, welcome back. Time to restart the Wonder Effects section. And I suppose you can try and pay attention to the thing I talked about during the time-lapse, where you can see that these bull rushes, when jumping here, they don't actually jump, they just sort of float in the air, they just walk across the sky. Which I don't think even looks that bad, it's just it's only noticeable because it looks different from the normal jumping animation. But I think the idea that these magical Wonder Effect Bull Rush Stampede enemies can sort of run across the sky, I think totally works. It's just that it's weirdly inconsistent with the Bull Rushes that jump to the right. But I don't think that's a big deal, and yeah, this section here is just crazy. The whole vertical section, honestly, I'm amazed I managed to pull all of this off. This is basically exactly what I had in mind before even starting work on this level, so the fact that this all sort of came to fruition, I'm just super happy with. Here you can jump over this big guy to get some more coins. That big piranha plant there is completely useless. He's just there to sort of hint at the fact that that was a mechanic in the level at one point. But I think that's fine. And I decided to keep the Rising Poison Water here after the Wonder Effect was done, because that's also how the original game does it with the Rising Poison in some Wonder Effects. And yeah, I guess that's it for this level, and also it for this video, guys. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe and whatever. I also have a Discord server, which is linked in the description, and I have channel memberships, which allow you to watch my videos early. But thank you guys so much for watching, see you later, and bye-bye!